Welcome, everybody, to the Too High Podcast. I'm Seth Galina. I'm joined, as always, by Diante and from the jump, ready to go, is Derrik Klassen, QB Klass on Twitter, our friend, making his return visit to the Too High Podcast, though his first visit was on the PFF College Football Podcast. But, Derrik, what's going on?
Not a whole lot. The weather here is not 100 plus every day, so doing a lot better in that regard.
This is going to be the first podcast we didn't talk about the weather.
No. If I'm going to come on the podcast, I get to talk about the weather. That's the whole reason I wanted to come on the podcast.
Okay, so there you go. Both of you guys live in California, so you guys have naturally better weather than everyone else in the world.
No. Diante does. I live in the Central Valley, which is not as great weather most of the time.
I wouldn't say it's great for me either right now. It's a chilling 63 degrees outside. So you see, I have my hoodie on.
All right, before we get into it, just want to give a shout out to Diante Lee, whose birthday it was yesterday, I believe. So happy birthday, Diante.
Thank you very much. You know what I spent my birthday doing? Posting, like any good internet person would.
Let's go.
It was either going to be playing video games or being on Twitter. So yep. There you go. All right, we start this week with LSU. LSU is going to let go of Ed Orgeron after the season ends, and so I will talk about it. So the first thing I want to say is I've been pretty anti-Orgeron the past couple of years, basically since the national championship, and I just want to take a step back and just kind of remember that the guy's from Louisiana. He played college ball in I guess McNeese, and then the whole thing was, I want to get to LSU. I want to be the head coach of LSU, and I want to win a national championship at LSU. And he did that. At the end of the day, he did that, and he's a millionaire and blah, blah, blah. So, congrats to him, I guess. What seems to have happened since that day in New Orleans in January 2020 is that's it. He did what he was supposed to do on this earth to do, and then he's just been kind of lounging ever since. And I think we always want to compare everyone to Nick Saban, trust the process, Nick Saban. But I personally am more on Ed Orgeron's side. If I won a national championship, that would be it for me. I wouldn't need to do anything else. That's the goal, is to win the national championship. And Saban obviously is the goal is to process. The goal is the process. It doesn't make any sense. And I remember one time Saban won the national championship, and he was pissed because that meant less recruiting days and recruiting visits for him. This was in maybe one of the first Alabama ones. So it's no one is really like that. I'm sure there's other coaches out there, there's other psychopath coaches out there, but I appreciate that Orgeron just said, I did it, and now I can do whatever the fuck I want for the rest of my time here. With that said, obviously it got to a point where it was really bad. Orgeron, and this has always been my problem with the CEO head coach, and he did work with the D-line for a number of years there at LSU, because that's what he was doing as a position coach before he became a head coach, but obviously no coordinator experience. And it gets to the point where one of the issues is once you I don't really believe in culture, creating a culture and stuff like that. I think winning creates culture, and you win by having good players. But and sometimes good scheme. So once you stop winning, it's of course everything is going to turn bad. And if you're not trying to put it back together again every day, and from what we understand, Orgeron was not trying to do that. You can go read the article by our friends Ross Dellinger and Richard Johnson on Sports Illustrated. And you can read a really good one by Brody Miller on The Athletic, talking about all of the issues. We don't have to get into now, but just all the issues. So it was just something that it was bound to happen. They were fucking awful for 2 years now. One of the worst programs on the planet. So it happened. And this means LSU's got an opening. This means LSU and USC have an opening. And guess what that means? Me and Diante both want the same coach for our favorite schools.
That's right.
So, yeah, anyways, we both want Dave Aranda.
Yes.
That's it. I think he's the best. I mean, I loved what he did at LSU. I mean, I made like I do with whoever's coaching my favorite team. I got on Twitter and I yelled at him or whatever for not having a pass rush once in a while, but like he's the best. So that's it.
Yeah, I will say I really only have a couple things to add. Number one, as a USC fan, you don't take joy in anybody being fired, but I will just continue to dunk on everybody who dunked on me in 2019, who said that how could you not hire the Cajun man at USC, the guy who lost to Notre Dame and UCLA in 3 weeks, as an interim coach at SC. But that's neither here nor there. And then the football thing, because I know, Derrik, for you don't engage much on the college football side until the draft comes around. But this is something that's just telling in football, period. And that's that if you really want to win, you got to have good players and good assistants. And when you win a lot, you lose your good players and you lose your good assistants. And, I do think that they tried to make attempts to hire the best assistants available. I think 2020 was a shot at that. You try to just go get the biggest names that were there. Obviously, the Bo Pelini thing was a disaster from day one, and there are some mitigating factors with COVID and trying to install a brand new defense, especially a defense as different as what Pelini's is from what Aranda's was. And then this past year, I think that was kind of like, we're getting the band back together, right? That was a one last job type of deal. And they just don't have the players this year. I think they have they had the assistants that they wanted. They just don't have the players right now. And, if you have that in back-to-back years at a place like LSU, that will get you canned. But I do think it's kind of telling. And I thought about it before we started this podcast because I was actually listening to the Athletic NFL show with Doug Peterson and Robert Mays this morning, and thinking about his career in Philadelphia and just how much changed after 2017 when your entire offensive staff goes and gets head coaching jobs or OC jobs elsewhere. It's hard to replace that, especially if you have something special the way that they did. And they were doing something in 2017 that not a lot of offenses were. So, I think that's ultimately the story as far as on-field goes. There's obviously all of these different Title IX implications that are happening at LSU. And, Orgeron is tied up in a lot of that. And he's implicated in some of his own things that pissed off people who are higher ups at LSU. And obviously this is not the platform to have that conversation today, but I do want to make sure that it's noted that that's a big piece of it as well. But as far as the football goes, man, you got to have good players, which is something that, you'll usually have at LSU, and then you got to have the assistants that can put the schemes around them. And that's something that they did not have after 2019.
Yeah, I think the only thing I'll add is the assistance thing is why Saban has been able to do what he's done. It's a revolving door every year because of course you're, like you were saying with the Eagles after Peterson won the Super Bowl and stuff. When you're the best, people want to steal your guys because you're the best. But Saban consistently has been able to replace those guys and still have a pretty unparalleled level of consistency that we've ever seen in the modern era. So. I think you make a good point that once he lost all those guys that were on the winning team, he wasn't able to replace them the same way that Saban or I don't know, maybe even Dabo could or something.
But this is the issue I always have with the so-called CEO coach, where with Saban, and I'm not saying this is the reason why they can do exactly what you two are talking about and lose assistant coaches and stay great every year. But he makes everyone learn the Saban system, and everything is like the three of us have seen certain stuff from playbooks and stuff from Alabama, and everything is he makes the offensive coaches who come in learn how to call stuff. This isn't everyone's doing their own thing where you bring in a Bo Pelini and he has his own terminology. Bo Pelini is going to come into to LSU and he's going to bring his terminology that's completely different from what Aranda did and what is different than what they were going to do on offense with Ensminger was still there that year. That was going to be different than maybe what Joe Brady was doing, and then they bring in Scott Linehan and everything is going to be different. And from what I understand is at Alabama everyone runs everyone has the same terminology. When you get in there, you got to learn that. And I think that helps for continuity. I mean, we know it helps for continuity. And that's Saban being, now maybe Saban is what we'd call a CEO type, but at the same time, like, this guy is a DB coach and he's been a coordinator somewhere. So this all starts from the Saban system, whether it's 20, 25 years ago, and it's continued down the line. The defense has evolved, maybe conceptually, but I think terminology-wise it hasn't. From what I understand, maybe I'm wrong about this, D.
No, I mean, I think that you pretty much nailed it. I mean, the conversation that's being had right now it's come up when I've talked about SC. We've had this conversation a bunch of different times since 2019 with LSU. When you see these wild fluctuations between teams, it's hard. Alabama is an exception, even amongst exceptions, guys. Like, when you're very good, you don't get to stay good forever because they take all your good guys. That's the way it's supposed to work. It's the same in the NFL. That's the reason why there's parity in the NFL, right? Because good players sign big contracts elsewhere. Good coaches get promotions elsewhere. That's just the way it goes. It's the natural order of things, and this is kind of where we're at with LSU. And, I think the next hire, the good thing for LSU is, for all the issues that are going on right now, it's not like they're also facing something massive coming from the NCAA, right? Like, that would be its own issue, right? And, no guarantee, no guarantee. It's early in the game, but I will say that, when we were talking about Tennessee after they let go of Pruitt, right? Like, that was something that was kind of overarching on the whole conversation. Like, man, whatever coach they want to hire has to step in with the understanding that what the state of the program is on day one might not be it at all even by day 30. And obviously, they've been able to kind of get by and haven't had to face their day yet, and there's no guarantee on what it will look like, whenever they do get a ruling from the NCAA on all of the recruiting investigations. We'll see with LSU. Maybe this Title IX thing continues to draw out and their new AD isn't able to, kind of put out all these fires that he's dealing with behind the scenes, and we may have a different conversation altogether about what LSU's football looks like over the next 3 to 5 years at the end of it. But as it stands right now, it's still an excellent job. Like I said, I will fight you to the death for Dave Aranda. But I do think that they'll be able to attract a quality coach no matter who it is.
Yeah, I don't think Aranda's actually coming to LSU.
I don't either.
Just from things that I've heard and the way he talks.
Bring the West Coast boy home.
Yeah, I think there's a bit of chance USC gets him. All right, so with that said, Derrik focuses mostly on, especially in season, on the NFL before he gets to evaluating linebackers, interior defensive linemen. What are you doing this year?
I'm doing the front seven stuff for Bleacher Report. So yeah, defensive interior, defensive end, linebackers. Normally when I get these types of jobs, I'm upset that I can't do the quarterbacks, but I'm very glad that Nate has to deal with that this year. So.
Yeah, quarterbacks are in a rough spot, and we'll get to that in a few months.
You mean you don't want to grind tape on Carson Strong?
I'm going to eventually, man, but I'm dreading it for sure.
How do you evaluate nose tackles, Derrik?
I mean,
I'm kidding. You
I don't even know where to start this question.
All right.
Do you get off the ball? That's basic. That's 80% of the job. Can you get off the ball?
Derrik, you wrote a really good article last week on Football Outsiders about the Bears defense. And, let's talk about it. What do you see when you watch the Bears defense?
So the one caveat that I have, and I think is probably going to be not necessarily their downfall, but why they have problems against certain teams, is like they don't have great cover players. I think Jalen Johnson has been really good, but I think you even saw against the Packers, he was a little bit up and down against Devontae Adams, which is going to happen sometimes. But the rest of their cornerback room is kind of whatever. Like Kindle Vildor is really scrappy, but he's not the best cover guy. Duke Shelley, another guy who's really scrappy, and I think they missed him in that Packers game. But he's also not particularly great in coverage. He's good in press, but like if you get him down the field, he's kind of screwed. But I think why their defense works is, one, they have two edge rushers who, like, you can just rush for, and they're going to get home all the time. Khalil Mack is obviously one of the best, and Robert Quinn is having probably one of the best seasons of his career, which is kind of crazy given, like, how many injuries he had the past few years, and then he was kind of down last year, so it's kind of insane that he's been as good as he is. And then their interior guys do a pretty good job of getting pushed, and they have like a really good 2 deep. So they just have this like incredible front four that they can consistently. They only have to rush 4. Like I think they have one of the lowest blitz rates in the NFL, and that allows them to consistently have numbers in coverage, which helps make up for the fact that like they just don't have great coverage players. At least in the secondary, like Eddie Jackson is good again, and like Jalen Johnson is good, but they don't have like a full secondary. And then I think, I put this in the article. One of my favorite things is that even though they don't bring pressures a lot and they don't necessarily do a ton of games, when they do it, like especially on third downs, because they're good at getting you into like third and medium, third and long, because they're really good tacklers, really good run defense. The way that they can scheme up pressure is kind of insane. I had the one in the article where like they have Quinn and Mack on the same side, and then they have a nose tackle over the center, so you can't slide to Quinn and Mack. Like you just can't. You would have to have the tight end there like pre-snap, and that's not what I think it was the Bengals that they were playing did. And so you just get Khalil Mack and Robert Quinn 2v2 against a guard and a tackle, and like those guys are going to be able to win that every time, especially when you have a rusher like Mack, who obviously is really good around the edge, but he's so powerful that he's kind of good being that like masher on games and stuff like that. So I think they just have an incredible front four that they can consistently get home with. It allows them to have bodies in the back end, and then the last little note I'll add on top is like I think Roquan Smith is playing really good, and he can do so many things in coverage that it kind of allows them to blend to whatever the offense is giving them.
The Chicago Bears #1 in sack rate this year, so and
they're not blitzing. Like that's crazy.
Blitz rate is we have 28th. Yeah, so that's just front four getting it done, and I think I don't know. I did watch them against Green Bay this week, and I actually thought they lose the game. I thought they did a really, really good job, and it forced Green Bay to grind out a win, and they really lost on 4 gash plays. There's like I think there was a power run to Dillon. I think there's obviously a couple Adams catches. What are you going to do about it? But really, it forced them to grind it out. And in drop back passing situations, Rodgers was holding onto the ball quite a bit. Like this was a very surprising performance by the Bears. So you hate to write the article and then they go out and lose a game, but they actually played really, really well.
Right, I think they did. And like I will say like the one other thing with that defense is they kind of have a tendency to give up those gash plays every now and then, and I think that goes back to just the fact that like they just don't have great coverage players. They have a great scheme. I think it's incredibly well coached. You can see in the way that the guys like the way they squeeze the air out of routes, the way that they will click and close on like shorter routes to limit yards after catch. Like these guys clearly know what they're doing, but because you don't have the greatest talent, you're going to get these gash plays where the best wide receiver in the league is going to be able to rip off 60 yards at a time on you. So I think that was kind of the problem they ran into, and probably one they'll run into again this week. I think they get the Bucs, which like they're probably outmatched there, but
right.
I think they just have all the tools to match up with pretty much any of these offenses that don't just have an elite wide receiver core.
I mean, the thing that's really interesting to me, after reading what you had written and looking at some of our data, is the fact that they've been so successful the last 3 weeks in spite of the fact that they're not really a good defense on first and second down. But it's because of what you said. Like, they can live with rushing 4 no matter the situation. So even if it's 3rd and 5, 3rd and 6, they can get enough pass rush to be able to cover with 7 and not get hurt. And to your point, I do think that, for whatever reason, they've had issues with stopping the run early. I think that that's really kind of the reason why they don't have great early down defense. But if you got the front 4 that they have, I mean, you kind of should be playing the pass anyways. And based on the way that this team is set up right now, I think that serves them best anyhow, and I like the fact that they've been able to lean so hard into the fact that they've got Floyd and they've got Mack, you've got Hicks, you've got these guys who can affect the quarterback, right? Who can affect the quarterback without needing to send pressure. And to your point, I think a big piece is the fact that they finally have a second level defender who can affect the game in Roquan Smith. And he had always kind of flashed, but I think that this is probably the most consistent stretch of football that he's played by far, and that's been a great thing for them in terms of being able to match up with guys, in the passing game, whether they want to play tight to routes or if they want to play soft and zone coverage.
Sorry, this always goes back to the same thing when we talk about just football in general. If you can rush 4, you can do a lot of stuff in the back end. So they don't need to, you talk about the secondary being just okay. They don't need to play a ton of man. They don't play a ton of man, and I guess in a sense they don't need to. And they don't play a ton of cover 3 either. I mean, they're sticking in too high. I just want to put this out because I didn't realize this as I'm looking up the coverage schemes. The Falcons play 46% in cover 2. That's more than Lovie Smith by like 20%. I don't know what the hell's going on. 46% of the Falcons' defensive snaps charted by PFF in cover 2.
Yeah,
I don't know. We don't have to talk about that at all.
Yeah, no, it's
weird, very weird.
And I said I don't know why I said Leonard Floyd when I meant Robert Quinn. That was a complete gap on my part.
Travis Gibson is also having a really good couple weeks. He's been really good. Yeah.
I also wonder. You guys probably have the data on this. Like, how much of their up and down run defense on earlier downs is because they play out of so many too high shells. Like, obviously when you just don't have the bodies in the box, like, it's just harder unless you have unbelievable safeties who are incredible at triggering down the way that like John Johnson was with the Rams. Like, Eddie Jackson is good, but he's not quite that level in terms of just like clicking and closing down in the box. So also like Alec Ogletree is just not very good, which kind of hurts them a little bit when he's one of your when you're playing a lighter box and he's one of your guys that are in the box. That's going to be a little bit of an issue. So, but I do think that probably helps them limit what's going on in the passing game, just generally the way that they structure their defense.
Well, while Seth is vamping, I can pull that up. So go ahead, Seth.
Oh, I was looking at the same thing. So they're 18th in cover 3 rate, and they're 23rd in cover 1 rate on first down. So again, it's that same thing where it's like they're going to play a lot of too high structures, and then it's going to happen where you get, because it's not just like, okay, yeah, having a great 4 defensive linemen, they're better on the edge than they are inside, and obviously we know that if you're going to play with too high, you got to be good in the interior. You got to be good interior D-line and linebackers, or else you're going to have problems. And we're seeing it now, speaking of this whole like Brandon Staley type of situation, like we're seeing it now with the Chargers. Like they can't play in the middle. So you're gonna line up in all these too high coverages, and we've talked about it, how he'll adapt based on the team. It's not always too high, but that they had one good game when we talked about it against the Raiders. And it's like, oh, maybe this is an interior D-line that can make some plays. And then it turns out they're not good. So, and then the interior linebackers are not good either. So it's like, it's going to happen where you're just going to get gashed. And the question is, how gashed do you have to get before you're like, all right, well, I can't do this anymore. Like, I got to spin. Like, I got to, or not even just spin. I just got to line up with bigger bodies inside and gap out. I don't know what the answer is there.
I think the Bears are like a good example of what it looks like to not be getting gashed too much, to where you're still getting value out of the way that they play. I will also say, the last thing I'll say, at least on last week's game, is like, I think Duke Shelley was technically active, but like he didn't play, and I think it was because he still is having ankle issues. But I think they really missed him in run defense. Like I said, he's not the greatest cover guy, especially when he has to work a little bit more vertical. But like, he will fit the run, man. And when he's one of your lighter bodies that you're playing in a lighter box, like, it really helps when your nickel can fit the run the way that he does. Like, I think I put this in the article, but like, every offense is going to have those plays where they have like a wide receiver in a close split and they try to come up and cut off the nickel. He does not get cut off on that ever. He is like always in the fit, and he's able to limit what guys are doing in run plays. So I think not having him probably had like a little bit of a ripple effect, at least in last week.
So I have some of the data, and what now I'm actually even more interested, so I want to go back and watch. So their average depth of tackle, so where they're making their tackles at, would rank like in the top 10 in the NFL, putting the run out of 2 high shells. I think they're like 12th in the amount of time that they have split safety shells, at the snap for a rundown. And I'm looking at their EPA per play, and I want to say, they're in the top 5 for that. So to me, the fact that they're not having a lot of success almost makes it seem like they're just playing the ultimate long game, which is that you're not going to be able to gash them enough times in the run game to punish them with it, and that they'll be able to live in 2nd and 6 more often than most teams, because they know that when you do go to pass, they're playing more split safety stuff, and they have the pass rush to affect the quarterback. So maybe we'll be writing about how this is the analytic guy's fever dream defense, not actually having talented coverage players and just loading up on pass rush and playing too high all the time.
Well, and the thing is, like I said, they got gashed 4 or 5 times. I mean, they really got gashed on one run play. Like, just in terms of the run, it was, like I said, it was an A.J. Dillon 25-yard, 30-yard run on, I think it was power. I don't remember now. But besides that, it was Devontae Adams, which is like, again, good players make good plays. So, like, I don't know if it's structurally an issue for them going forward. Obviously, like you said, if they get Duke Shelley back, who's been a good player for them, then they can really make a run. And obviously, if the offense starts to get going, I think all 3 of us are believers in Justin Fields all right, well, they're going to start hitting on a lot more plays going forward. So I think that is something to look forward to with the Bears defense. Okay, it's getting to close to the end of the week, so we will do our Sunday Night Football preview, and we have the great Carson Wentz against the San Francisco 49ers. But it's good that we have you on here because, Derrik, you love Frank Reich. So tell me about Frank Reich. Why do you love Frank Reich?
Yeah, make me watch this game because Carson Wentz is a gross quarterback. So sell me on this game.
Carson Wentz is like the top graded PFF quarterback of all time, I'm pretty sure. So
doesn't make him not gross.
I will say I think this year, at least up until T.Y. Hilton got back recently, like they didn't have the talent to, I think, be a very good offense. Like they had a lot of like okay receivers who would be good as your number 3, but they were all having to like be a lot more than that, which I think was a problem. But I think why I like Frank Reich is like he does a better job, I think, than most coordinators of doing a really good job of mixing up his formations. Like he's going to stress you horizontally. He's going to like condense everything. He's going to stress you that way. He's going to tie a lot of his like run action to his play action very well. I think that was especially true when Jack Doyle was playing better. I think this year in particular, he is not as good as he had been, especially like, during the Andrew Luck era or even like the year that Jacoby Brissett started. Like I think he was really good at that sort of stuff and making his play pass look really convincing. I think this year, because the offensive line is not as good, they've had a little bit of trouble doing that. But I think just generally, I think he does such a good job of making every single player on the field a threat at all times. And when they have 8 or 9 guys that they're consistently cycling in, the fact that he can make all of them a threat at any given time, no matter the formation or concept, I think has always been really impressive to me. It just doesn't seem like he's a guy who's ever boxed into anything. And I think that that's been really impressive. And I'm hoping that with T.Y. Hilton back, if the offense can open up a little bit more vertically, that's going to open up kind of everything and really let us see like what this offense is supposed to be with Carson Wentz. Like I'm still not sure Wentz is like good again, but truthfully he's been like fine. He's been better than I think, better for sure than he was last year, and potentially better than I think a lot of people thought he might have been coming into the year.
I think that the word that you use is the perfect descriptor of everything with this offense, which is fine. Like, from a talent perspective, all their players are just fine. The running game is fine. The receivers are fine. Carson Wentz is playing just fine this year. But to your point about Reich, like, I think that this has always been a feature of his offenses, and that's his willingness to literally do anything it takes to get the ball into his best player's hands. So they run inside zone, outside zone, and duo. They'll run power if they have to. They run RPO. They run every style of RPO that you can imagine. They run all the bunches, all the stacks, all the motions. Like, it's every piece of an offense that he can cobble together. It's funny sometimes, as a USC fan, I've always been a big fan of Michael Pittman, and watching him, I'm like, this is the ultimate extension of the run game receiver that exists in the NFL. All of his targets are within 8 yards of the line of scrimmage, and it's almost all got to be yak, right? So, he's catching a bunch of screens, or he's the check down guy. They use all their tight ends as check down guys. They're not vertical threats. So I think it's been interesting just to watch an offense kind of be able to manufacture yardage down the field, in all phases. They don't really have any one thing that's more explosive than the other. And they don't have any one guy in terms of talent. We'll see what T.Y. looks like once he's back, and really back at 100%, what he looks like within this offense. But they just don't have a take the top off guy, either in the run game or passing game. But they've been able to create just enough, I think, to stay competitive every week.
I think with this offense, the thing that always scares me is, like you said, it is a bit of a grab bag, a bit of a spread offense grab bag situation. So it's like Wentz has to be really good, and he's been really good. However, against pretty bad defenses. Like, they've been a pretty easy slate of defenses. Obviously, last week against the Texans, can't stop anybody. Dolphins, Seahawks, just not good defenses. I think there's another bad defense in there as well. So curious to see how it works when they start playing against much better defenses. They've also been weirdly good against man defenses. So they played the Ravens and had really good success. They played the Dolphins and had really good success. And then against the zone defenses they play, and they play the 49ers, who are predominantly a zone defense. They haven't been as good, which I couldn't tell you why. I just know that it's been weird. Now, they were good against the Texans, who play zone, but it doesn't really count. But I think the thing that's interesting to me is, like, the play action game when I watched them is interesting because I don't find it to be like a play action game that's the concepts are like, oh, these are our play action concepts. Like, post over is a classic. It's like, hey, they run their play action to just get into the regular concepts, if that makes sense, and maybe run them a little deeper. And because they're in the shotgun so much, that's kind of what you are, right? Shotgun play action attack is a lot different than under center play action attack, which they don't do a lot. So in the gun, you're just getting a flash fake, and then you're just going to run your deep sail concept, and then that's kind of what they are. So it is like, for me, it just feels like, as much as I do like Reich and I do like the offense, you put a lot of pressure on the quarterback to be really good. So he's been really good against bad defenses, but we'll see what happens when they actually play against a good defense.
Right.
The thing I would say on that, with like Wentz being in the gun so much, is like how much more does he actually want to be under center? Like, is that something you really want to get away with? Like, is that something you really want to do with Carson Wentz? Because I feel like generally he's someone who, for as long as he's been in the league, even though he's like a super under center guy in college, for as long as he's been in the league, he's kind of been better when he's had things a little bit more spread out for him, RPOs, that sort of stuff. So while I do kind of agree that I wish they could get more into their play action stuff from under center, like when even Brissett was the quarterback, Luck was the quarterback, even Rivers I think was the quarterback. They were better at that. Like, I almost wonder how much of that is a Wentz problem rather than a Reich problem.
I think, to me, the one thing that's been interesting to that point is the fact that, in spite of the fact that he has good arm strength, he's just never been a good tight window thrower. And I think that, a lot of what you want to do on under center is, very timing based, very window throw based. At least the way that we kind of think about like the play action game and stuff like that. And that just has never really been his best attribute, in spite of what kind of arm talent that he's had when he's been healthy and at his peak. I do wish that they had more of it within the offense, because I think that would do a lot more for, like a guy like Jonathan Taylor. I think they'd be able to do even more with their run game if they were able to mix some stuff up, or you had the threat of bootlegs and stuff like that. But yeah, to your point, it's never been a comfort of his, and I don't think that he's ever really performed well in it, throughout his career, at least since he's left North Dakota State.
Yeah, and it's like, but it just like with the Eagles, it forces him to be the offense.
Exactly.
Right.
And then when he's bad, like he was in 2020, like the whole, like you cannot fix it. Like It's just bad, and that's it. And this is like what we always talk about. It's like, well, you can just put him into a system where you can mitigate that type of stuff if you need to. Now, again, they're having success this year, so you're not going to see it, because they're going to keep going with this until, if it comes off the rails when they start playing better teams, and that's a whole different story. But like, this is what they do, and I think he is a good RPO thrower to a certain degree, and maybe you can get into some quarterback run stuff from the gun, but I think this is who they are. It suits Reich. This is what Reich wants to be as well. Like I said, I think it's just concerning if they hit a wall here with some good defenses. Though obviously, if they play really well, if he continues to play as well as he's done, because he's throwing the ball accurately. Like this is a guy who could not throw the ball to any receiver at all last year, and he's obviously settled down and he's throwing the ball accurately. So maybe this is the new Carson Wentz, and reuniting him with Frank Reich has really worked wonders. I guess. I don't know.
I guess it's been just good enough so far this year. I will say a concern that I have, at least as it relates to Sunday, is the fact that San Francisco does have a little bit of a pass rush, and they can get home with 4. and their offensive line has just not protected Wentz very well, especially not in like must-pass situations. A team like Tennessee was really able to give them a lot of trouble earlier in the year with like simulating pressure and showing these different like 5-down looks where you're bringing nickels or weak safeties and dropping guys out. So I would be really concerned about whether or not they can stand up on the edge and keep Wentz clean enough on Sunday in order for him to get to all of the stuff that they do well. And another thing that I've noticed now with the Niners, I was kind of concerned, with Saleh leaving, what they were going to be with DeMeco Ryans, because most of his career was spent in like, that attacking 3-4 or attacking 4-3 where you're always in single high shells and blitzing. But they've basically been a half and half, middle of field open, middle of field closed team. So I'm interested to see what kind of RPO game the Colts are even able to get to, because they do a pretty good job of having their nickel kind of playing half and half. And you have a guy like Fred Warner who can play, run and pass if you get into 3-by-1 and stuff like that. And one thing that they do that's really nice, and it's not something you can take advantage of as well in the NFL game as you can in college, and that's like the weak safety triggering down into the run fit. Like, you can't really do that in college because offensive linemen can work 3 yards down the field, so you can throw those humongous post balls, those big glances behind it that you can't really throw in the NFL. So it's harder to take advantage of that, and they don't have like a Tyreek Hill, a guy who can run a 4.2 and just get in the window faster than, you can cover it. So I am kind of concerned if they're not able to get to their RPO game early in the game, on first and second down, and you get a guy like Bosa coming off the edge against whoever they have at tackle. Oh God, Eric Fisher, I forgot.
Eric Fisher.
Yeah, and Julian Davenport, like,
they've both been horrible.
Yeah, it's not not a great business model. It can be rough. So that, to me, what they do on early downs is going to be really telling to me.
I think the pass rush thing is big too, because like we know that Wentz has always been a guy who holds the ball, and that's fine when he's playing well and doing other things well. But like he doesn't move the way that he used to, and he's still like an okay-ish athlete. But his thing used to be that like once he broke the pocket, like he was getting away from you more often than not. That's just not the case anymore. And I think, especially when you have tackles as bad as they are and the edges of the pocket are going to be as condensed as they're probably going to be for most of this game, I think that's where you're going to start getting problems with him.
All right, let's flip over to the other side of the ball where the 49ers, who apparently Trey Lance is still injured, Jimmy Garoppolo is playing. And that is unfortunate because I only have information on Trey Lance in that offense.
I was going to say, I wasted my entire prep on this game.
Yeah. But anyways, let's talk about Trey Lance for a bit here. Basically, they put him in the game against Seattle when Jimmy gets injured, and then he plays the next week against, oh my God, I don't remember who.
Cardinals.
As basic of an offense as you can get. They just didn't give him a lot. And Shanahan said that in a post-game press conference or a pre-game press conference, whatever. And I just thought it was coach speak. It's not. They ran the same concepts over, and they did not give him a lot of stuff to do, whether it was the run game or the pass game. But with that said, one of the things that's really interesting is, for the 49ers offense is never been a pistol offense. Never. All of a sudden, Trey Lance becomes quarterback. Here goes the running back in a pistol, because they don't want to be. I think what teams are realizing when you have this type of player is shotgun zone read is actually for like immobile quarterbacks now. If you want to go and gun, if you have a mobile quarterback, you got to get into the pistol and you got to run quote unquote either whether you want to call it duo read or via read or whatever. Like, you got to mash teams with double teams. And you're not really zoning people and getting that vertical push. You're almost sealing them. And we're going to run downhill instead of the running back. We talked about this a lot, I know, but instead of the running back coming across the quarterback's face in a shotgun action, and then the running back, if you run zone read, the running back has to read out zone. You have to block it up, and the running back's going to have to read out zone. Now, obviously, you have a cutback lane because you're reading the end, whatever, but you still have to read out zone, and he's trying to hit oftentimes a front side A gap. Now, if you run pistol via read, you're going downhill. He's not coming across the quarterback's face. The quarterback is turning his shoulders to kind of be towards the sideline, and he's coming downhill. So if you're making the read right, if as a quarterback and the defensive end who you're reading plays you as the quarterback and you're giving that ball, you are downhill right now, and you're not dealing with blockers in front of you because you're just trying to wash everything down and create this lane outside of the tackle's ass that you can just run through right now if the defensive end chooses to play the quarterback. And then the opposite way, because it's happening so fast for that defensive end in front of his face, he's got to make a decision now. He can't. It's harder for him to slow play the read and say, okay, well, let me just shuffle, and then when you keep it, I can pop out and attack the quarterback. Like, he's got to make a decision. He's got to go tackle the running back. And this is why colleges like to do this, and this is why the triple option still works from under center when you're talking about Army, Navy, Air Force, whatever, is that running back's got to, it hits so fast, you have to make a decision as a defensive end. And that's what they've done with Trey Lance, to say, hey, we don't need to run this quote-unquote Shanahan. And this goes back to what we're saying about what is an offense. Is it the quarterback? Is it the play caller? Whatever. This is no longer quote-unquote the Shanahan offense. This is the Trey Lance offense with a lot of Shanahan bells and whistles, but this is what it is now. Good. I'm glad we're in agreement on that.
Derrik, I do have a question for you. I think that you would have better eyes on this than even I would. But when I watch him in the passing game, while he was healthy, it seemed like, one of the things coming out of North Dakota State that I thought was a really big feature of his abilities was his processing speed and how well he was able to work through progressions and get the ball to where it needed to be. Even downfield, not always looking for checkdowns, but his ability to work progressions downfield. When I'm watching him now, it really looks like he has no idea what he's looking at, that he has no idea how to work through a progression. He's staring at. I don't ever remember seeing him stare down receivers the way that he has, and I don't know if that's just like a lack of trust or lack of information on how to run the offense, or if defenses are throwing different coverage shells at him that he hadn't expected. But it's very clear to me that he is like a step and a half behind on almost all of his progressions in the passing game.
I think for now I'm pretty willing to chalk it up to just like he's a 21-year-old in a very hard offense, like historically. And he didn't play football last year. I think there's a lot of like really bad things going against him there. But I think you're right. Like when you watched Lance at North Dakota State, like there were plenty of plays where he's running like play action. He's reading like two deep things. I don't know, maybe like a scissors concept or like a flood concept to the right. And then he's coming back and hitting a backside dig. Like that's Seth's big thing, like hitting the backside dig. But like he did that all the time at North Dakota State. And you could see him go 1 to 2 to 3 in the pocket, slide up one way if he had to, and still knew where he needed to go with the ball. Like you saw him do that all the time, like in every single game. And now I think to your point, like he's a lot of like, he knows, Nate Tice frames it this way. Like he knows what the first route is on the play. After that, it gets a little dicey, especially if he has to work from like one side to the other. I think he's not been very good at that. And like even, I think it was like a 3rd and 11 against the Cardinals. He threw like an awesome dig route to Mohamed Sanu. But like the thing is, the best quarterbacks in that scenario would be able to read out whatever is front side and like kind of hold the safety over there if they're playing like too high so he can't come pin down on it, and then be able to come back to that dig. He can't do that right now. He just knows that like the dig should be open behind this linebacker, therefore I'm going to stare at it and throw it. And he did that, and it kind of let the safety pin down on it a little bit, and I think Sanu kind of heard footsteps when he was about to catch the ball, and that's why he dropped it. So I think that's sort of the problem that you're having with Lance now. And again, I think I chalk this a little bit more up to like inexperience, didn't play football for a while, that sort of thing. But if this continues by, if he's playing again by the end of November or something and he still looks this way, I would be a little bit more concerned, but I mean, I guess we'll just have to see. Yeah,
he went the wrong way on a run play against the Cardinals.
Oh, it was like the first play of the game, right?
Yeah. And I think he just kept the ball and got like 10 yards or something because it's Trey Lance.
Because he can, yeah.
Yeah, and then there was the one where, again, our friend Nate Tice posted where they're running like the frontside concept is to his right, and those backside digs you're talking about are coming from left to right, but then he takes his drop back and he looks to the left, and it's like I want to chalk it up because I like Lance. I want to chalk it up to he's fucking nervous. Mm-hmm. Like that's the only thing I could say is that because it's weird how much different he looks in the passing game than we're used to. Because look, at the end of the day, yes, I know he's a young quarterback, but quarterbacks come out and they should be. It's weird. Like we don't see this often, even for young quarterbacks. Not just looking totally out of it in terms of what they're supposed to do on a play. So hopefully, like you said, hopefully that gets better. If it doesn't, then we're gonna have to start really talking about it. If you just can't figure it out. But yeah, that's kind of the thing they're doing. One of the interesting things that the 49ers are doing too is they're using use check in the backfield a lot as like next to the quarterback in gun. And I don't have the percentages in front of me, but it's basically like they rarely did this, and they kind of did it I think in 2017, and then they did not do it in like 18, 19, 20, and now they're back to putting him in the backfield. And I think this bodes really well for what they can do in the run game. So instead of it being
doing it a lot too.
Go ahead.
They're probably stealing some stuff from the Ravens because like the Ravens.
The run game is all Ravens, dude.
Yeah,
it's
exactly.
all Ravens. So like what they can do now is instead of now if you put like whoever the running back is, like the halfback, the tailback in gun next to Lance, then you have to do what I said and run zone read. Which I'm not saying a zone read is a bad thing, but like that's what you kind of have to do. Whereas when you put a fullback, and obviously a really good fullback, and use check, all of a sudden now here's quarterback power. Now, from that gun position, now here's quarterback counter. Now here's all this stuff that you can do that's really interesting using Juszczyk as the lead blocker. They don't really do anything that interesting in the pass game when they do throw with him. He really just runs to the flat a lot. But I think there's a lot of really cool stuff they can do with him there. And honestly, even if Jimmy G is playing quarterback, they can do some fun stuff with him in the backfield because he's such a unique player and obviously the league's MVP. So there you go.
I will say I do think the corollary between what the Niners are right now and what the Ravens had been early in Lamar's career actually extends beyond just the running game. Because if you go back and watch, the Arizona game from an all-22 perspective, you can see that all of Lance's best work comes when the field is completely spread. So if they want to run the ball, you get into what you said, that pistol stuff where you get all of those different, those follow motions, where you get those arc blocks and you're getting downhill. And then when you have to pass, it's all his best stuff comes from like 10 personnel looks or getting into like true empty. And that's when, you can space the field out as much as possible. And then he's able to work in much wider windows and he can be his own check down. So I think that, to your point, I think that for me, I'm chalking it up not only to him getting comfortable, but Shanahan realizing that this has to be a different kind of offense. You can't do the completely precise 11 personnel. We can run all of our drop back stuff both from the gun and under center, and asking your quarterback to have to see all of these different things at one time. I think that even Jimmy, for all of his shortcomings, I thought that he was pretty efficient at his best working through a lot of that stuff. And it kind of serves, it serves to reason considering where he came from before he was in San Francisco, right? Like that's a high degree of difficulty offense as well in New England. For Lance, even though I do think that he will eventually have the ability to be able to play, from regular old 11 or 12 personnel and run that drop back game, from tight splits and everything. Right now, I do think they should probably lean into kind of gimmicking the offense out in the passing game and just space it out as much as possible and liberate him to use his legs, whenever he can.
Yeah, we make fun of Garoppolo for like being linebacker blind like 4 times a game. But that offense, the offense was like designed for Garoppolo because they didn't think he had the arm strength, so they had to bring everything in. Mm-hmm. But yeah, it was tough because you're always reading this option route to dig, option route to basic. Like it was really hard, like all these high lows on linebackers. So eventually you're going to be blind to one. He's going to pick you off. But that's exactly what you're saying that they should not and are not doing with Trey Lance. That would be not well for him. So I agree with you, and it does remind me that the Ravens early in Lamar's career, the MVP year, empty. They're absolutely hammering teams. Like one of the best empty teams that we've seen because, like you said, he can be his own check down and he can just play in space, and that helps a player like Lamar, like Trey Lance.
So last thing I'll say on it, I just looked at the data. All of the dropbacks he has with a negative EPA per play happen with the tight end attached, or with 2 backs in the backfield. And every single one of his positive EPA per play dropbacks happen when the field is split, like all of them. And his best graded formation to pass out of has been empty. So You know,
but this is what we talk about a lot. It's like the more spread you get, the more one-on-ones you're creating,
exactly.
which was the whole idea of the spread 25 years ago, where defenses couldn't play these one-on-ones. Now defenses can play these one-on-ones, which means you have to have really good one-on-one players, and obviously at tight end, even when he's split out, George Kittle is one of them. But the quarterback, and Trey Lance specifically, Lamar Jackson, all these guys, Mahomes in the spread system, they could be one-on-one players. And obviously that's what you're hoping for with a Trey Lance, whereas Garoppolo, if you spread him out, cannot be a one-on-one player.
Right.
I think, too, the last thing I would say on why Lance is struggling to do a lot of the condensed formation throw over the middle of the field, stuff like that, whereas like Jimmy can is like a lot of the times those windows don't look open. Mm-hmm. Like you have to just believe in the system that it's going to be there, and that you've repped this 100 times, and that you know that if you throw this on this timer, that you're going to be able to get it over the linebacker. It's why Ryan Tannehill is as good as he is at what he does. Like, he has an awesome arm, and he's going to hit the top of the drop, and he's going to rip it no matter what, and somehow the ball gets over the linebacker every time. Like, that's just, you just have to have that faith in the system and in your arm to do that. And Lance does have the arm to do that, but, like, when the windows look different in the NFL and you don't have that many reps doing it, I think it's hard to believe that those things are actually open when they very much don't look open a lot of the time. And, like, even Jared Goff, like, I think Jared Goff could do it because he didn't think about whether it was open or not. He just threw it.
Right.
And, like, he was kind of, like, he has a good enough arm talent that if you point him in the right direction and say, just throw this, he's going to do it a lot of the time. Like, he can do that. So I think that's kind of the issue that Lance is having with that, is he kind of just has to believe, like, it's going to be there if I throw it, and I think he just has to let it go. But it's tough. It is, especially when you're as young as he is.
Before we move on, Diante, Colts defense, anything interesting?
No. It's my least, least favorite kind of defense.
They're cowards.
I watch. It's just so jarring, right? In the college game, I don't even think twice about teams that just play soft zone coverage all the time, because that's just the way you play in college. But when you see an NFL team do it, oh my God, it is the softest style of defense in the world. And the fact that I have to watch my favorite team do it every Sunday absolutely murders me. I can't take it. Be real men, as Derrik will say. Grow up. Fight back.
Yesterday I just happened to watch 3 Big Ten defenses. Nebraska, Iowa, and Michigan. And Iowa and Michigan have good defenses this year. We talked a lot about Iowa this whole year. Obviously, when they were undefeated, they lose to Purdue, but like they just run defense. Like, I don't know how else to put it. Like, they just play defense, like the Colts do. They just like play a defense. They line up with 2 high safeties. They play a 4 down, like a 4-2-5. They line up with 2 high safeties, and then they play zone. They play cover 4. Sometimes they play like Jesus Christ, I forgot the D'Antonio thing. Press quarters. They play press quarters, so like, yeah, you're man on the outside and you're zone in the middle. Okay, whatever. It's the same thing. It's cover 4. And then they spin down and play cover 3. They never play man. They just don't. They're just like, well, we're not going to do that. And that's kind of like the Colts. Like, they just play soft zone, and like that's what they do. And then it can work. And like Iowa is a good example of what we talk about a lot, which is, hey, if you want to play too high, have 2 good interior defensive tackles. They have 2 really good ones. So there you go. So anyways, all right, Colts defense, check that off the list. All right, next we want to talk about Derrik. I believe this is your favorite quarterback because you share a first name with him. Derrik Carr is playing really good this season. What have you seen with him?
He is playing really well this season, and the thing is, like, Derrik Carr he has been a very good quarterback for a long time, but like when you go back to like 2018, 2019 in particular, like, he was wicked efficient in like the 1 to 10 yard area, and just like if you gave him an ounce of space, he was going to take it every time on like a stick route, slant, whatever. He always knew what your leverage was and how to beat it, but he wasn't going to press you down the field, and he was going to try to beat you by 1,000 paper cuts. And I think what we started to see it last year, where he was a little bit more willing to open up. Like, he'd always been a good shot play guy. Like, if you call it, and that's like the only thing that you can throw is the deep route. Like, he can do it. He's always been able to put those on the money, but like, he wasn't always as willing to throw down the field if that was not the only thing on the play, or if he got like pressure, or if he got pushed off of his spot. He used to just be completely unwilling to push the ball down the field in those scenarios. I think what we're starting to see this year more is like, if the pocket is unclean, he's very willing to just be like, well, I know Henry Ruggs is down there and I know he has a step. I'm just going to throw it. Or he's been more willing to be like, okay, I know how my guy's going to work back to the ball here. Like we saw one play against, I think it was the Bears. He had like, it was like a deep play action concept. One guy was crossing one way. I think Ruggs was crossing deeper over the other way. And like Ruggs had to come back to the ball and Carr had to like scramble, get out of the pocket a little bit to make that work. And like, that's just not the kind of play he used to make. And then there was another play against Denver where it was like 3rd and 12. Ruggs is running a post and like 3 rushers get through and he just rips it off.
They're playing cover 0.
Yeah, it's like the same stuff. Like Aaron Rodgers makes that throw a lot. And like obviously Derrik Carr is not Aaron Rodgers, but like the fact that he has kind of made that development where he's willing to make that throw, like 2019 Carr probably just shrivels up and takes a sack. Like that's just the reality of things. That's just what he did. Or maybe try to throw it away and get a penalty. But like he's a lot more willing now, I think, when things are not perfect. He knows he's more okay with things not being perfect and just willing to press the ball down the field. And I think, especially with Ruggs' development and with Waller being as good as he is, I think it's been a really good thing for their offense when the offensive line is not very good and they can't run the ball. So I think it's been very important that he's been able to make this development for their offense.
I mean, I think the most important thing, I don't have much to add, but I think the most important thing is that Carr, just as a quarterback, has an understanding now of how defenses are playing him. Like, I thought that Ravens game to open the season was really instructive, right? Because when he was trying to force feed Waller in those short to intermediate areas, there's just nothing there. And the second that he realized, like, oh, that's right, everybody's sitting on my checkdowns. I have to throw the ball over the top. Even if the protection's not clean, it's opened up a lot for this offense. So that willingness alone, and it's not like he's never had the arm talent to do it. So I'm glad that, I don't know, to your point, maybe he just grew up, and decided he had to be a real quarterback for once. But seeing him actually take those shots down the field has been one of my favorite revelations this season.
And I think not even down the field has been the big thing, but like there were a lot of instances, man, where like 2018, 2019 Carr, where like they would maybe have like, every offense has like dig flat where it like, but Carr, historically speaking, would just take the flat. He would take the free 5-6 yards. Now I think we're seeing he's a lot more willing to just rip the dig in there. Even if it's like tight coverage, even if he thinks he has to barely beat a linebacker, like he's been a lot more confident. I don't know if he's grown up. I don't know if he's just really likes these receivers and really trusts them. I don't know what it is, but he's just a lot more willing to make the tough throws on the field, which is not always something that's been true for him.
There was a throw that he made against Denver to Ruggs, where Ruggs is in a condensed split and runs a skinny post just outside the hash. Was it a touchdown? I don't remember now. It was a big play, though.
Yeah.
They were on their own side of the field, maybe on like their own 40 or 30 or something like that. And they're playing like a one high thing. The Broncos are playing a one high thing. I think Justin Simmons is the one high safety. Mm-hmm. But because of the formation, he's pushed off the opposite hash. Mm-hmm. And so, he's not like in the middle of the field, but he's not that far from the middle of the field. And Henry Ruggs, his split is condensed, so he is closer to the middle of the field, running like just a vertical route down there. And Carr holds Justin Simmons just enough to get the ball over back to Ruggs on this go route, which I don't think you would have saw, because it is a tight throw. Because, like I said, even though Justin Simmons is off the opposite hash, he's not that far, and he's not that far from Henry Ruggs, like geographically. So I think that was something that I'd never seen from him before, making that type of kind of deep, tight window throw. And it's obviously partly is just, hey, we have this player who can run fucking fast, so let's throw him the football.
Obviously, and that's the thing too. I think Derrik Carr is just more willing to beat defenders. Whereas a lot of, if they were throwing shot plays, a lot of the time, previously, it would be he just thought he had a one-on-one on the sideline. Didn't have to be an extra safety. You just have to beat the corner. Or a lot of times, if they were throwing, a post, it was they were beating it because the safety was nailing down on a crosser, or it was too high and he's only one-on-one against the safety. That sort of thing where Carr used to be able to throw these one-on-ones where he only has to beat a guy. Now I think he's a lot more willing to beat windows and beat where the defense is actually trying to squeeze you and stuff. And I think, to your point, especially on that play, the fact that he's a lot more willing to do that, it's just, man, it's done so much for their passing offense.
You got to be willing to attack the middle of the field, man. Like, you just have to.
Yeah.
Whether it's football success or financial savvy, the right questions help set the stage for winning strategies. Western and Southern is teaming up with PFF's very own Chris Collinsworth to share insights that can help you put ahead on both your fantasy and financial scoreboards. Want to hear about Chris's old playing days or behind the scenes with Al Michaels on Sunday Night Football? How about a need to know for your financial future? Now you can ask about either or both. And every football or financial question you ask earns you a chance to win a catered party for February's big game. Check out the Chris Collinsworth podcast and Western and Southern's Instagram for answers to the best questions each week. Submit your questions at westernsouthern.com/askchris. One more time, that is westernsouthern.com/askchris. If you're watching on YouTube, check out the link in the description below. Remember, with Western and Southern, you can rest assured on game day. Also, one of our favorite partners on the Too High podcast is Home Field Apparel. Home Field is a premium collegiate clothing brand out of Indianapolis. Incredibly comfortable, officially licensed apparel with vintage college designs. Home Field is in the middle of big new Saturday season 2, where they launch a new school collection every Saturday at noon for 16 straight weeks. So they've done Georgia. I saw Georgia Tech. I saw North Carolina, Florida, a whole bunch. But this Saturday they're releasing another. So go to homefieldapparel.com and use promo code PFF to get 15% off your first purchase. That's homefieldapparel.com, promo code PFF for 15% off your first purchase. All right, let's get into a little bit of scheme talk with you, Derek. You wanted to talk about something that happens on 0.06% of all NFL snaps. So the floor is yours to talk about split back gun.
Yeah, so I had you look this up because what I'm learning is happening here is it's one of those things where you like realize the value of a particular scheme thing or a player or something maybe. And so you like hyper focus on whenever it happens and you think it's happening more than it is, when in reality it's really not. But for me, that's been split back gun. And I think what is so interesting about split back gun is like you can really see from team to team like why.
What is split back gun?
Oh, split back gun. So like you're obviously in, your regular shotgun formation, you would have quarterback in the middle, running back next to them. Split back gun, you have a running back on both sides of them. And so like why I think it's so cool is like you obviously, what you give up is that you just can't have as many immediate guys in the passing route. Like you just don't have as many guys up on the line of scrimmage, which obviously has some certain drawbacks. But to me, why I think it's so cool is like one of the things you can do is you can kind of push both of them out as like chip help, and you can pretty much guarantee that you're not going to get edge pressure. And I think against particular matchups, that can be really valuable in doing that. And then like obviously when you chip those guys, you're getting quicker bodies out into as your checkdowns, as opposed to maybe chipping with a tight end. And then that guy, obviously you can still throw him the ball, but he's not going to be as good in space typically. And I think you see, the Texans do a lot of that. Where they're having both guys chip, like when they go to split back gun, that's kind of something that they do. I think even the 49ers might have had a rep of doing that I had posted at some point. So that's one of the things you can do. And then
the Steelers run split zone from it, I think.
Yeah. See, that's another thing you can do is like you can get like split flow with the two running backs. Even the Texans have done that. I remember doing that. So, and then you can even like play action off of that split action. Like I think the Ravens actually had a rep of that even just last week, which I think can be really tricky because then you can get a guy who is pretty much going straight into the flat, like off of your run action, which I think is kind of can just be a nightmare for linebackers. I think it was Kaiser White that they got like on the Ravens did that play action that he kind of just his head was spinning. He didn't really know where he was supposed to be going. But then you look at a team like the Cardinals and even like I think the Chargers kind of use it this way when they go split back gun is like they're using it to stretch you horizontally in like the option game, or they'll like quick flare motion one guy out where they're getting like just a quick screen out to the side, and then they have like a run action off of that. They're trying to stress you horizontally. They don't really care about what they're doing it with pass protection or any of that sort of stuff. They're trying to lean into what they do generally as an offensive philosophy, and I think it's just like another tool for them to do it, which I think is really cool when I think especially in the Cardinals situation, like they have two good running backs that they can kind of get away with doing that with. So I think it's just one of those things. It's obviously not like I don't want any offense to be 50% split back gun or anything crazy, but I think it's a really cool tool that a lot of smart offenses are using right now.
Right. I got nothing to say. Everything you said you could just do from other formations, so I'm not even going to qualify anything you said with the response.
Big hater energy.
I actually, the one other thing I'll say is actually not having as many immediate like pass catchers in the route can be bad in certain ways. I think if you have a great quarterback, because obviously if you have a great quarterback, he can read all that stuff. If you have a guy who either is not as comfortable reading the entire field or just has such great arm talent that he can just fit like a tight window that if you know a guy's running a stop route or whatever, you can kind of get away with doing that and only having 3 guys in the route and then shoring up your pass protection with these 2 guys on the edge. That's why the Texans do it, because I don't think they trust Davis Mills to really read out the full field. They can just tell him, like, hey, man, just throw the over the ball route and we're going to make sure that you're protected, that sort of thing. So I think it has value in that sense, too.
My favorite thing about this, every year, my good pal Derrik has had at least one formation that he's leaned all the way into, and I love it. I think that now it's probably tempered more, but I remember what was it? Was it the empty with the two wings, or it might have been like the old sniffer 2-back stuff, or like this is the future.
Pistol H-back
yes,
stuff.
That was the future for a while.
This is good because this is the best bit yet. Because there have been 80 split back gun plays out of 15,000 plays run.
And I've seen them all.
Hey, that's the
future. I do think you could do some good misdirection, like you said, the splits on stuff. It's just like I'll do it from other. You can just do it from H back. You can just do that.
Yeah.
To me, the
like pass
what
pro
you're
stuff, you can
describing,
just do it from empty.
What he was describing as far as like back releasing into the flat and all that, like that's literally been the Ravens play action game for the last 4 years was Lamar. It may not be out of split back gun, but it's the same idea. Like I watched Andy Reid use like the near back, far back stuff when he was coaching at Philadelphia. That old school West Coast offense. We're going to flare our fullback or flare our halfback out in the route, and we can still run all of our regular protections out of it because we're not investing, getting 5 guys out all the time. You can still kind of get that horizontal stretch. So it's just funny. All this stuff cycles so much, and I know that we've said this on this podcast 1,000 times over, but it kills me, just how much this stuff cycles over time. And now it's just different presentations to get to the exact same thing that was happening in the mid '80s. That's the part that kind of blows my mind.
Look, under center split back. Like if I'm going to go under center, I might use some split back. If that was going to be like my offense. Because I just like the aesthetic of those old like West Coast teams when they were super split back and they were doing some cool stuff in the run game from under center. But I'm out on split back gun. Sorry, Derrik.
Matt Nagy is the only guy I can remember in the past few years who does any of that, and it's like 2 plays a year.
Always. It's always the Bears. Okay, we're gonna talk about something that happens not 0.6% of the time, but this year, 23% of the time specifically, and that is teams, like we finally have data for something that me and Diante have talked about a fucking lot on this podcast, which is the dilemma that defensive coordinators are having right now in the modern NFL and how to stop modern NFL offenses. 23% of the time this year, highest we've seen in many, 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 many years. There is a nose tackle lined up, so a nose tackle as a zero technique right on top of the center on a first down snap. And that has been climbing every year for about 4 years, basically since the Legion of Boom and that defense took over the league. The issue, so why is that? My understanding of football is that the reason you play with the nose is to get into bare fronts, and a bare front means 5 defensive linemen, a nose right over the center, 2-3 techniques over the guards or just outside the guards, and then 2 defensive ends, wherever they are, whether they're lined up outside the tackle or outside of tight end, whatever. That is a zone stopper. I mean, it's anytime you put a lot of defensive linemen on the field, on the line of scrimmage, you're going to be a good run stopping front, but it really is a zone stopping team because it prevents double teams. Everyone is covered both guards are covered and the center, so they can't double team and get vertical push or a horizontal push on defensive players, and that frees up linebackers to make plays. And again, it's specifically a very good against zone. Well, the NFL is a zone league. Football is a zone. College football too is everything's zone. So that is what you get. So NFL says, hey, we need to stop outside zone specifically. What are we going to do? We're going to play with 5 defensive linemen. We're going to play in bare fronts, and we're going to stop it like that. The issue is now, if you're playing with 5 defensive linemen, you are losing a player at the next levels, either in the secondary level or the tertiary level. So you get ends up what you want to be is in a 5-2. Sorry, I shouldn't say that. So what you end up with is less players to cover pass routes and less players at the second level, with the linebacker level. So teams are saying, okay, well, we can't just play with 1 linebacker on the field in the intermediate area. We want to play with 2. So that means we have to spin a safety down or put another linebacker on the field and we play with 1 safety. But we have a problem, because what is modern NFL saying? We need to play with 2 high safeties. So this is a dilemma that NFL defenses are facing, because we want to play with 2 high safeties to eliminate crossing routes from this outside zone boot action that we see all the time. But we don't want to leave just 1 linebacker at the field, because that leaves so much space between that 1 linebacker in the field when there's 2 safeties behind him. So this is just the issues we see, and then the numbers show up because you see a lot less quarters and cover 2 and cover 6 when teams play with a nose. So yeah, it's just the issues that come with this kind of stopping this new style of offense. Now, of course, you could just do what colleges do and play tight front without any C-gap defenders, and then you can live in a 2-high row whenever you want, but NFL defenses are not ready for that just yet.
I mean, the truth is that NFL defenses kind of can't do that because the tackles are too good. You'll get zoned. Yeah. You'll get outside zone to absolute death if you tried that. But I mean, it all comes. It bases out of the same idea, which is that if you want to be in 2 high, you got to close the bubbles, right? You just can't leave interior gaps open if you want to be in the 2 high shell, especially not against the spread. So it doesn't shock me to see that the data supports that, and it's the best way in the NFL to take away that quote unquote conflict, right? You don't always want to have to ask the guy that you're paying $12 million a year to rush the passer that he's got to play a primary gap to a secondary gap, when you can just get another 310-pound guy to stand in the B gap and eat up the space. So that, to me, it's just interesting seeing how they kind of problem solve, because you don't want to be in 4 down and being 2 high against the outside zone team, and the fact that this is the answer, and this used to be the answer to offenses, and again in the 80s. So it trips me out, just the cyclical nature of this stuff. You could have never convinced me in 2008, when a lot of the spread stuff really started taking off, that you would go back and kind of retrofit some of these 80s approaches to stopping, 70s and 80s approaches to stopping offenses to the modern era, and we just continue to see that year over year.
Derrik, thoughts on Bear friends?
I mean, I think just to your point that you've made this on Twitter a lot of the times, is if you line up in this what is basically a 5-2 front or 3-4, however you want to say it, you're either telling the defense or telling the offense we're going to bring 5. You're going to bring your 5 guys who are paid to rush the passer, or you're going to drop one of them into coverage, and that ends up with, if depending on whatever their formation is, you might have this is a problem that the Bears have sometimes. They have Robert Quinn dropping out to cover a slot receiver. That sucks, dude, man. Robert Quinn is a great player, but
Von Miller, when who were they playing against? Oh my God. Anyways, the team went trips to the field, and Khalil Mack is playing nickel basically, because they have to walk him out.
Yeah, and it's there are some outside linebackers who are can do that, but dude, that's just not.
That cannot be your answer.
It can't be your answer.
That can't be your answer. I'm sorry.
The only thing that is somewhat interesting to me in that regard is I feel like we've seen Arizona do a little bit of this, and they actually put Isaiah Simmons on the edge, which I think is interesting because he can kind of rush the passer enough. And if you drop him in to cover the slot, he can do that too. And he's obviously a unicorn in that sense, and not every team has that. But that's one of those funky answers that like a team in a very particular situation can kind of get away with to solve this.
The Seahawks last year, when they still had KJ Wright. Now KJ Wright plays, the Sam and the Bear, which is a defensive lineman.
Exactly.
But he's KJ Wright. So like you get a pass set, you can always be like, oh, okay, wait a minute, let's just move KJ Wright out of here, or we can just drop him from the line of scrimmage and know that we're getting a good dropper out of it. So yeah, there's ways teams can defend it. But what it really means is the body types are changing in the NFL. Like you can't this is going to be something. And again, only 23% of the time on first down that we see this, but that's still a number that is going up. It's been growing up by 3% every year. So it's 1 in every 5 plays. And next year, if it's 1 out of every 4 plays, that's a big number too. So. I think it's really interesting how the defensive end position is going to have to kind of change body types, or at least one of the two is going to have to kind of change body types.
Dude, I'm telling you, peak Bruce Irvin would have been like the guy for this, because there were instances in Seattle where, I mean, obviously he was a pass rusher, but they would have him like carry wheel routes as a flat player, as like a pass rusher, and he could do it. So like, I wish we could have gotten like peak Bruce Irvin in this kind of this era of defense or whatever.
Did you guys know that it's football season? And did you guys know what that means? It means we're going for 2 here with the sponsors of today's show, Manscaped. Blitzing through hairs has never been easier, and it's time for you, yes you listener, to join the 2 million men worldwide who trust Manscaped by using promo code PFF at manscaped.com for 20% off plus free shipping for all your orders, I guess. It's 3 and out the window with all the trimmers. Now go tame that Wildcat offense. The brand new Lawnmower 4.0 is here to take your defense to the next level. It's here to take your defense to the next level. This 4th generation trimmer features a cutting edge ceramic blade to reduce grooming accidents thanks to their advanced skin safe technology. The Lawnmower 4.0 has a 7,000 RPM motor, a new multifunction on off switch that can engage a travel lock, and gives you the ability to turn the 4000K LED spotlight on and off when you need it for a more precise shave. Did I mention this trimmer is waterproof too? Rain, snow, or sleet are no match for the waterproof power of the 4.0. That 4000 LED spotlight is wild to have on a razor. I've used it to try and find the remote control that I lost underneath my couch last night, and it was perfect. So get on that if you need a flashlight and a razor built in one. So again, get 20% off and free shipping with the promo code PFF at manscaped.com. 20% off, free shipping at manscaped.com. Promo code PFF. Stiff arm your pubes out of the playoffs this year with Manscaped. All right, last 2 things we're going to talk about are the 2 articles that me and Diante wrote for the website, pff.com. First, you wrote about the Tampa Bay Buccaneers and how they're changing their offense quite a little bit.
Yes, so, I mean, right now, they've obviously been great on offense this year. I wouldn't say that they've had any problems with their offense, but I think the way that it's looked has been different, and a lot of it is just because they're not mauling teams out of those 12 and 13 personnel sets the way that they were able to last year. You're running a ton of duo, and then out of duo, you're running those like deep, play action concepts where you can get a tight end up the seam. You get a guy like Mike Evans on a skinny post, and Chris Godwin or Antonio Brown on that sail route or whatever. Like that was one of their money plays, and it just hasn't been the same this year. But they've been able to maintain their efficiency and their effectiveness on offense, basically like just by playing the hits, doing what every other good offense in the NFL is doing. Just getting to 11 personnel, tight splits with your receivers, and you just run a bunch of duo and outside zone, and you're just absolutely punishing the edge. It's crazy to see just how effective that is in the NFL. And a lot of it is just because it takes such a different approach to defending those 2 plays and defending tight splits from receivers in general, that you can really put defenses in a bind, and they're so explosive with their receiving core that the second that they catch you leaning and putting too many guys up near the line of scrimmage, they're just going to eat you alive with their play action game. And their level of efficiency when it is play fakes out of 11 personnel is ridiculous. So it just trips me out to see, it's much different now than what it was last year in terms of how they're getting to their explosive plays, but their explosive plays all the same. And the fact that they were able to basically pick up on a new style of offense 4 weeks into the season, because this wasn't something that they were doing to open the year, is like, oh, we can be just as explosive doing this as we were doing everything we did last year. No big deal. Having a 45-year-old quarterback who can do all of this, defying the natural laws of age and science. It's a trip to watch, and they have all the talent that you need in order to get away with, basically picking up a new style of offense halfway through the year.
We haven't really talked about the Saints a lot, but the Saints are doing the same thing. The Saints have just decided, hey, we're going to be outside zone. That's it. It's going to be outside zone. Now, it hasn't worked. The efficiency has been a lot different than the Buccaneers, and a lot of that has to do with they're not very good interior players that they've had to start on the offensive line. But yeah, it's the same thing. Like, every team is just like, it's funny how teams are like, all right, this is it. This is the meta. Like, I don't care who we are anymore. Like, we're just going to get into this stuff. And, not to like bogart this with Saints talk right now, but like some of that has to do with Kamara being the only viable running back on that team and him being more of an outside zone runner. Then like, you put it in Mark Ingram, you put in Lat Murray, and you can run your duo downhill run. So it's a little different, but still, that's all the Saints do this year is run outside zone. So yeah, it's like the Buccaneers doing the same thing. You have thoughts on the Bucs? Tom Brady, Godwin, Mike Evans, Ali Marpet, Derek, thoughts, anything? So first thing that comes, let's do word association. What's the first thing that comes to your mind when I say Tristan Wirfs?
Good.
Good. All right. That's a Too High podcast, ladies and gentlemen. No, yeah. Any thoughts on the Buccaneers?
I guess I would just ask Diante. Like, I mean, they were more of like a duo, and like they were trying to do some more gap stuff last year in particular. And they were more of a 12 personnel team. I think to your point, like, do you think that they've been significantly worse doing those things, or do you think they've just wanted to make this evolution into doing more 11 outside zone, that sort of thing?
I don't know if I would say worse. I think that there just hasn't been a progression within doing those things, and I think that they found. I think when they started running outside zone was basically in week 4 against Miami, which makes a lot of sense, right? Because they're a heavy man team. You're just running the run support players off, and then just hitting these creases on the inside. And I think that they realized, like, wait, not only was that a good game plan thing, but like, we're actually good at this. Like, we have the offensive linemen that can move bodies to do this. And Leonard Fournette actually happens to be a pretty good outside zone runner. Like,
I would have thought that.
But like the fact that he can actually put his foot in the ground, in the C gap, get upfield, and obviously being the load that he is, like if he catches a safety rolling down and run support, he's gonna win that more times than not. And I think they've just stuck with it from there. They still have a decent amount of their inside zone, their powers, their counters, a little bit of pin and pull stuff. Like, they still have a pretty diverse run profile. I just think that what they found now is, because Godwin's been so good, I think specifically, and Brown's been so good, I don't think that they can find justification for taking one of those guys off the field as often. And the fact that Godwin is such a good blocker and Mike Evans is such a good blocker, they can run 12 personnel runs out of 11 personnel, because you got these guys who can go dig out linebackers and safeties, and run support. So I think that it's served as a really good counterpunch, in because of what outside zone does in terms of setting up play action game. Like, it's just been such a valuable counterpunch for them. And now that they do it, the more that I watch it, I'm like, well, why didn't you guys just do this all the time? Like, you guys could have literally killed everybody with this. So I'm not surprised that they basically pivoted and been just as explosive as they were last year.
Yeah, I see regular season last year versus regular season this year. They've doubled their rate of outside zone. So it's a lot. I mean, it's not that we're doing it that much, but still they've doubled it. Okay, before we get to the last thing, I just want to remind you guys that if you go on PFF.com, you can get 25% off any PFF subscription with the promo code TOOHIGH. That's TWOHIGH. Grades and data are live for every single player who logged the snap last week. Go check out the highest graded players from week 7. What else can you get? Well, you can get our locked article content, which means Deontay's Tampa Bay Buccaneers article and my Dak Prescott article, which we'll talk about in a second. PFF's NFL and college football betting dashboards, grade power projections, cover probabilities, and betting values. A 0 to 100 grades of every single player, including the top rookies on every team. Player prop tool, which shows the negative and positive value for every NFL prop, and much, much more. Support the podcast and use promo code TWOHIGH, TWOHIGH, for 25% off any subscription. All right, last but not least, Dallas Cowboys are hammering teams. Absolutely hammering teams. Dak Prescott is unbelievable right now. But the coolest thing for me is, and I think they made this decision before the season started, and it's proving very good dividends now that Michael Gallup is out. So last year, they were this, especially when Prescott was on the field, they were this unbelievably high rate of 11 personnel because they were like, oh, look at all these great receivers we have. We have Michael Gallup, and we have Michael Gallup, X. It's like perfect prototypes. Michael Gallup, X receiver. Amari Cooper, Z receiver. CeeDee Lamb, slot receiver. So good. And we're so good. And it's great. And Dak Prescott, you can get away with it because you're spread and you have a really good quarterback. But what they decided to do this year was say, hey, we have these two tight ends. And we talked about this, I think 3 weeks in a row now. But I wrote the article about it. They have cut their 11 personnel percentage down from 79% last year with Dak in the game to 55% this year with Dak in the game. And that is allowing them to mash the fuck out of people. Duo runs, downhill, all day, put two tight ends on the field. They lead the league in snaps where two tight ends are touching each other. Two tight ends are lined up on the same side. And they're just mashing teams. And then Dak Prescott is being one of the best quarterbacks in the league. Is there something you've seen from Dak, Derek, that you're really liking this year?
I mean, not necessarily any different than he's been the past couple of years. I mean, I think we said this even coming into the year, he was probably the 4th or 5th best quarterback in the league, and he's playing maybe the best right now. But I think the way that he just handles pre-snap, the way that he just throws with incredible timing, his accuracy is mostly outstanding. I don't think we're seeing anything different from Dak in terms of an execution standpoint. I think he's pretty much always been this good. I think, kind of to your point, the offense has really just, I think, done a better job of not pigeonholing themselves into this, we have these receivers, we have to be 11. They're no, we have, because even for as good as all those receivers are, none of them were particularly great underneath options, in my opinion, which I think is kind of the value we're seeing with some of these tight ends that they're using now, is these guys are a little bit better.
Name their tight ends.
It's Dalton Schultz and Blake Jarwin. I know their tight ends. I know that you don't.
I don't know who the hell he called the last time we talked about it.
Gavin Escobar.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think they're just, it's kind of like the stuff that I love with Frank Reich, where he knows that he has all these different pieces and is going to stress you and get the value out of all of their strengths being on the field at the same time. And I think that that's really valuable. There's no, when they have, when they go to 12, what is the weakness on the offense? There isn't one. You have CeeDee Lamb out there. You have Amari Cooper. You have one of two good running backs who are both really good at catching the ball out of the backfield. Zeke is a big, 220-pound back, workhorse or whatever, but he's really good catching the ball out of the backfield. And then you have these two tight ends who are mostly good in the short to intermediate area, but can also both kind of stretch the field a little bit. They can just do whatever they want when they get into these 12 personnel sets. And truthfully, I think a lot of this 12 personnel stuff is probably better for Zeke, because I think the way that he can navigate just trash when you have these condensed sets and stuff, and when you have these bigger boxes with more bodies, the way that he can navigate that for a guy his size, it just doesn't make sense, man. He is seeing into the matrix sometimes.
He's such a good slalom runner.
Yes, he just, the way he can change direction almost, and the way he can press up the field while still cutting back into another lane. It's hard to describe without the video, but man, he is just, the efficiency of movement for a guy his size and understanding where the defense is trying to pigeonhole him and stuff is just, it's out of this world. And I think when you put more bodies and ask him to navigate more trash like that, I think that's actually where he thrives. And I do want to say this because I think Tony Pollard is a good back, but there's a reason they don't use him for as much stuff like that. He's not as good navigating that stuff. And I think he's not as good if he takes a hit, being able to fall forward for a couple of extra yards. He's just not. That's why I think when they go to Pollard, it's all of their outside zone stuff. It's a lot of their like lighter personnel, and then they'll try to do a gap scheme thing to get him, because he wants to bounce basically every gap scheme thing they do, and I think that's why they do it, because they want him to bounce. I think you see a lot more weak zone with him because he's willing to just bounce it when you have less bodies on that side of the field. So I think they've done a really good job at really just getting everything out of every player on this offense. It's really cool.
Dak had one throw that I loved. I think it actually got called back, but who gives a shit? Sorry. They get cover 0 from the Patriots, and they're running a double move with CeeDee Lamb as the outside receiver. And so you're thinking, okay, well, yeah, that's good. No problem with that. But what ends up happening is they pump for the slant and go, the sluggo, and he gets bottled up. Like the DB doesn't bite too much, and then Lamb can't get vertical afterwards. It's cover 0. Like there's a free rusher. And Dak says, whatever, I don't care. And then he turns his body to the middle of the field and he throws a strike down the field to Cedric Wilson, I believe. Like that's crazy to get to your second read on like an all-out blitz like that after a pump flick. You're running sluggo seam and getting to the seam against cover 0 pressure. Anyways, that's enough. We're done. I'm done. I don't have anything to talk about anymore. Derrik, where can the people find you?
You can find me at QB Klass on Twitter. I do the film room over at Football Outsiders. That'll be tomorrow. Probably writing about Derrik Carr, so this episode is a little bit of a preview for that. I do some gambling stuff over at Odds Checker, and then for Bleacher Report, like we mentioned, I do all the front 7 scouting stuff for the NFL draft. We haven't put out too much content for that yet, but it's coming. Also
the best gaming journalist on the planet.
That's true. If you need League of Legends tweets at 5 a.m., I'm the guy.
And who doesn't really?
Exactly.
All right, this was Too High Podcast from myself, Diante, and Derrik. We bid you adieu, and we will see you next week.